The rain clawed at the glass walls of the penthouse as Lena stared down at the city that once spat her out, her phone buzzing with a name she hadn't seen in years. Mom. The voice on the other end was polished, trembling with rehearsed calm. Our lawyer will call your agent, sweetheart. The word sweetheart stung. Lena's agent, Marcus, stood across the room, his brow tight with disbelief, his hand gripping the $2.7 million contract that had changed everything overnight. Their silence was electric, a mixture of triumph and betrayal. Lena laughed, short, sharp, defensive, as thunder cracked above them. They promised me nothing, she whispered. Now they want a cut. Marcus didn't answer. The world outside shimmered in fractured neon reflection, as if even the city were holding its breath for what would come next. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds like judgment. Lena, now wrapped in a navy trench coat, walked into her agent's office where Marcus and attorney Delmont, her parents' representative, were waiting. Delmont's briefcase gleamed with precision. His smile was practiced, his tone casual yet loaded. Your parents merely seek acknowledgement, he said. Lena's reply sliced through the polished calm. They sought absence for 27 years. Marcus stayed silent, eyes flicking between the two, sensing the collision of past debt and present power. The hum of air conditioning filled the space where truth dared not. Outside the building, Lena lit a cigarette she wouldn't smoke, the city's chaos roaring below. Every billboard bearing her face now felt like a verdict. Marcus joined her, quiet, his tone measured but heavy. They'll go public if you push back. Her lips curved into a brittle smile. Then I'll make sure the world knows what they're asking for. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of danger. The contract was more than a deal. It was her first weapon. That night, Lena sat alone in her penthouse, laptop open, drafting a message to her fans. Words came like confession and vengeance intertwined. The cursor blinked, hesitant, alive, before she hit send. Somewhere, her parents' lawyer's phone began to buzz. The message was public. Marcus's name lit up her screen seconds later, but she didn't answer. She poured herself a drink instead, watching her reflection blur in the glass. Half victory, half ruin. By morning, Lena's post had gone viral. Headlines blazed, fans rallied, and old ghosts stirred. Marcus arrived with newspapers under his arm, eyes wide, not in shock, but admiration laced with dread. You just declared war, he said softly. Lena smiled faintly. No, she replied, sipping her coffee. I just told the truth. The hum of the city below seemed to bow in acknowledgement, the day already burning bright with consequence. The echo of Lena's viral post rippled through every digital corner of the city. Inside the studio's glass meeting room, Lena faced a tribunal of executives, smiles sharp, words rehearsed, eyes calculating the cost of controversy. Marcus, seated beside her, played the diplomat, his calm a mask barely holding. Across the table, CEO Adrian Vale, silver-haired and poised, adjusted his cufflinks before speaking. You've made noise, he said smoothly. Now, let's see if you can make money from it. The tension pulsed like bass through the glass walls. Lena leaned forward, voice low, lethal. I already have. Later that evening, Lena stood outside the old townhouse she grew up in, a place she'd sworn never to return. The door's paint had peeled, the garden gone to ruin. She raised her hand to knock, but froze. Behind the curtains, a faint light moved. The sound of laughter, distant yet unmistakable, echoed through her memory like a wound reopening. She turned away before her shadow could reach the doorstep, her phone buzzing in her pocket with Marcus's name again. This time, she let it ring. At a late-night cafe, Marcus sat waiting, his phone open to the headline of Lena's latest interview. Her words fire against the past. When she finally entered, rain dripping from her hair. Silence hung thick between them. "You can't fight blood with press releases," he said, his tone softer than his eyes. She sat stirring her coffee without looking up. "I'm not fighting blood," she replied. "I'm erasing a name." The hum of the espresso machine masked the weight of what neither dared say aloud, that she was burning her own bridge, and his career with it. The next morning, Adrian Val's office gleamed with sterile opulence. Lena stood by the window, the skyline stretching beneath her like a challenge. Adrian paced behind her, reading from a tablet. "You've made yourself a story people want to buy," he said. "But you'll need control. Legal, financial, emotional." She turned, eyes like glass. "Control is the only thing I've ever paid for." His chuckle was faint, brittle. Outside, the city blazed in sunlight, unaware of the contracts about to change destinies. By sunset, Lena stood again in her penthouse, the city humming beneath her. Her phone lit up with a single new message from her parents' lawyer, Delmont. "They're offering reconciliation," it read. She stared at it, unreadable. Marcus, arriving at her door moments later, found her by the window, calm, silent, a glass of red wine in hand. "You're not answering?" he asked. She shook her head. "I already did," she whispered, lifting the glass in a quiet toast to the skyline, to the war still unfolding in headlines and hearts alike. The morning news hit harder than caffeine. Lennon's parents had spoken. Their televised interview painted her as ungrateful, unstable. A daughter who forgot her roots. Lena watched in silence from her dressing room mirror as makeup artists fluttered around her. The studio lights glared. Her reflection stared back like an adversary. Marcus, pacing behind her, slammed his phone shut. "They played it well," he muttered. Lena's lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "Then we play better." The hum of the studio outside was distant thunder, but the storm now belonged to her. That afternoon, Lena walked onto the live talk show stage, applause washing over her like counterfeit affection. Cameras whirred. The host smiled too wide, and the questions cut deeper than they seemed. "Did you expect fame to replace family?" he asked. Lena's eyes flashed, a hint of hurt beneath her poise. "I didn't replace them," she said softly. "They replaced me," the audience gasped, and in that instant, her silence turned into a weapon, the kind that would echo far beyond the broadcast. When the interview aired, the world reacted instantly. Marcus scrolled through endless feeds. Hashtags, outrage, devotion. The empire was building itself from chaos. Across town, Attorney Delmont watched the same broadcast in a dim office, cigarette burning to ash beside untouched paperwork. "She's learning," he murmured to no one. Meanwhile, Lena sat alone in her car under the glow of a traffic light, watching her own face reflected in the windshield. A stranger, a revolution, a reckoning. Days later, Lena and Marcus met with a branding consultant in a minimalist downtown office. The consultant spoke in numbers, graphs, and control tones, but all Lena heard was strategy dressed as sympathy. "You're more than your trauma," the consultant said. "Let's monetize that." The air stilled. Lena's voice, calm but venomous, cut through the sterile light. "My trauma isn't for sale. It's the reason I'm standing here." Marcus gave the faintest nod. They'd come too far to be redefined by profit margins. That night, Lena stood on a private balcony overlooking the sleepless city, her phone in hand. The message from her parents blinked unread, a single line. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." She exhaled, then hit delete. Behind her, Marcus stepped outside, coat collar raised against the wind. "You sure?" he asked quietly. "Absolutely," she replied, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "You don't rebuild from ashes. You build from fire." Below, the city pulsed with light, as if saluting her resolve. A week later, the industry's elite gathered for the annual Zenith Gala, a night of flashbulbs and whispered alliances. Lena arrived in a gown that shimmered like armor, her chin high, her reputation the night's most discussed accessory. Marcus guided her through the maze of cameras as Adrian Vale watched from across the ballroom, flanked by investors who thrived on scandal. When their eyes met, the air cracked. "Careful, Adrian," Lena murmured as she passed him, her smile sharp as glass. "Some fires don't burn out, they evolve." The orchestra swelled, but beneath the elegance, everyone smelled smoke. Later that evening, Lena found herself on the balcony outside the ballroom, the city glittering below like an audience of secrets. Adrian Vale joined her, his tone soft but laced with warning. "Public defiance has its price," he said. Lena didn't turn. "So does silence," she replied. The wind caught her hair as their reflections blurred in the glass door, a queen and her rival, poised for a private war. Inside, applause erupted for someone else, but neither of them moved. The night was theirs, and neither planned to yield. The next morning, the tabloids screamed with speculation, photos of Lena and Adrian on the balcony, headlines twisting glances into betrayal. In the penthouse kitchen, Marcus tossed the newspapers aside. "They're trying to turn you into their villain," he said. Lena smirked, sipping her espresso. "Good. Every empire needs one." Outside, the city glittered without apology, just like her. She had stopped defending her story. Now she was rewriting it. By afternoon, Lena's legal team assembled in a downtown high-rise conference room, contracts, countersuits, strategy etched in every word. Attorney Delmont arrived, older now under the strain of consequence, his voice wavering as he laid out her parents' demands. "They just want peace," he said. Lena's reply was razor smooth. "They want profit." Marcus watched her with quiet awe. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was conquering. Outside the window, thunderclouds gathered again, as if the storm had been waiting for her signal. That night, Lena returned to her penthouse balcony as rain began to fall again, the same way it had when this all began. The city was alive beneath her, restless and radiant. Marcus joined her, his umbrella useless against the wind. "You've won," he said quietly. Lena turned toward him, raindrops tracing down her face like war paint. "No," she whispered, a small smile breaking through. "I've just stopped losing." The thunder rolled once more, not in warning, but in applause. Morning sunlight spilled through sheer curtains. As Lena sat cross-legged on the penthouse floor, surrounded by open envelopes, letters from strangers who saw themselves in her story. For the first time, her fame felt heavier than vanity. It felt human. Marcus entered quietly, holding a tablet with new offers. "You're trending everywhere," he said. She smiled faintly, setting a letter aside, for once not for the wrong reasons. The city outside hummed with quiet reverence. Even the skyline seemed to pause. The war had given her scars, but it had also given her truth. And truth was the most dangerous currency of all. Later that afternoon, Lena returned to the studio that had first signed her. A place that once symbolized everything she owed, and now stood for everything she'd overcome. Adrian Vale was waiting in the control room, his tone unusually sincere. "You've outgrown us," he admitted. "That's rare." She looked at him through the glass, her reflection superimposed over his. "Then let's call it even." The quiet between them wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement, the closest thing either of them would ever allow. That evening, Lena met Marcus in a small rooftop bar overlooking the city. The chaos had cooled, but their partnership still burned with quiet intensity. "You could disappear now," Marcus said, raising his glass. "No one would blame you." She laughed softly. "Disappear? I just got here." The sunset painted her face in molten hues, and for a moment, they were just two survivors sharing the silence after victory. Below them, the city began to glitter, alive, endless, forgiving. When Lena returned home that night, her inbox held a single message from her mother. No threats, no lawyers, just 3 words. We saw you. She didn't reply, didn't cry. She simply closed the laptop and stepped out onto the balcony, barefoot, breathing in the humid night air. The city stretched before her like a promise, unforgiving, magnificent. Somewhere between loss and legacy, she'd found her peace. It didn't need an audience anymore. Weeks later, the world moved on, but Lena didn't vanish. She transformed. Her name still trended, but this time attached to a foundation for young artists, not scandal. Marcus watched her on stage at the launch event, her voice steady, her conviction radiant. Our stories don't define us, she said to the crowd, but they build us. Applause rose like a wave. In the front row, Adrian Vale and attorney Delmont exchanged quiet nods. The storm that began in secrecy ended in light, and Lena stood beneath it, unbroken, unstoppable. The foundation's launch became a phenomenon overnight, yet Lena felt the familiar hum of unease beneath the applause. Fame had changed shape, not disappeared. In her new downtown office, glass walls overlooking the skyline, she read through proposals and donation offers that felt more like veiled transactions. Marcus stood near the window, scrolling through messages from sponsors eager to rebrand themselves with her image. They want your name, he said quietly. Lena looked up, her tone calm but cutting. Then they'll have to buy my silence with more than money. Outside, the city burned gold in the afternoon sun, sharp, endless, and watching. That evening, Lena met Adrian Vale again at a quiet art gallery, neutral ground. The paintings loomed around them, all chaos and color, mirroring the story neither had finished telling. You've built something untouchable, he admitted, his voice lower than before. Lena tilted her head, studying a canvas splattered in scarlet. Nothing's untouchable, she said, only earned. They stood in silence, the hum of soft music around them. For the first time, Adrian didn't look like a rival. He looked like a relic of an empire she'd outlived. Later that night, Lena returned home to find attorney Delmont waiting in the lobby, briefcase in hand. Your parents are selling the old house, he said. She studied him, her voice barely above a whisper. Then let them. That house was never home. He hesitated before handing her an envelope. They left you this. Inside was a single photograph. Her as a child, singing into a spoon, her parents laughing in the background. For a heartbeat, silence became sacred. Then she folded the photo and walked past him toward the elevator. The past no longer demanded her attention. It only reminded her she'd survived. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the penthouse to find Lena barefoot on the balcony, the photograph now framed beside her coffee cup. Closure, he asked. She smiled faintly. No, Dave. Perspective. The sky was clear, the city humming below like a well-tuned machine. You're not the same woman I met a year ago, he said. Good, she replied. She wouldn't have survived this long. The wind carried her words into the morning, scattering them like a quiet anthem. As dusk fell, Lena stood on the stage of her foundation's auditorium, now empty except for her and Marcus. The air smelled of dust and new beginnings. You ever think about what comes next? He asked. She looked toward the rows of empty seats, her voice steady. No, I just keep building. The spotlight above dimmed slowly, leaving only the soft glow of the exit sign. Marcus smiled. Then let's build something that doesn't end with applause. Her laughter echoed gently through the hall, soft, certain, and utterly free. Months later, Lena's foundation had become more than a headline. It was a movement. Young artists filled the corridors of the renovated warehouse that now bore her name, their laughter echoing like a promise she had once needed herself. Marcus watched her from the mezzanine, pride and exhaustion blending in his gaze. You built a revolution, he said. Lena turned toward him, her expression calm but alight. "No, Marcus, I built a refuge." The hum of voices rose around them, alive with creation. For the first time in years, Lena's world wasn't about survival, it was about legacy. That evening, Lena was invited to deliver a keynote at a global summit for creative entrepreneurs. Backstage, she stood still beneath a halo of blue light, listening to the muffled murmur of the crowd. Marcus adjusted her microphone, his hands steady but his eyes proud. "You ready?" he asked. "I've been ready since the day they told me I wasn't enough," she said with a quiet smile. When she stepped on stage, the applause was thunder, but her voice, measured, honest, fierce, cut through it like truth breaking glass. After the summit, Adrian Vale approached Lena in the lobby, older now, the sharp edges of power dulled by humility. "You were right," he said simply. "It's not the empire that endures, it's the voice." She studied him for a moment before replying. "And the silence we choose to break." They shook hands, and for the first time it wasn't war, it was understanding. Outside the glass doors, flashbulbs waited, but neither flinched. The world had turned, and both of them had learned how to face its light without fear. Back at her penthouse, Lena found herself alone again. But this solitude was different. Earned, not imposed. The framed photo of her childhood now rested on the shelf, beside her awards, symbols of two worlds finally reconciled. She poured a glass of wine and leaned against the window, city lights dancing across her reflection. Marcus' message arrived. "You did it." She smiled softly, replying with just 3 words. "We both did." Somewhere below, traffic shimmered like veins of light, carrying her story outward. Alive, unfinished, unstoppable. Weeks later, Lena returned to her parents' old neighborhood, not to reclaim anything, but to leave something behind. She placed a single white rose on the cracked doorstep and whispered, "I'm done needing you." The air was still, the house silent, but the weight lifted like dawn breaking after endless rain. Back in her car, Marcus waited, the engine running, his eyes steady on her. She slid into the seat, exhaling deeply. "Where to next?" he asked. She smiled at the horizon. Forward. The city swallowed them in its light, the road endless, her story finally her own.